Okay, guys, so this is going to be a short discussion of argument analysis. What we're going to do here is look at a very simple argument with no sub-arguments. And our first job, of course, is to find the conclusion. So once again, to review some of the strategies that we're going to use, we're going to go sentence by sentence through an argument. Of course, you're going to learn how to do this more quickly. It won't be quite so painfully slow, but you're going to begin by considering whether the sentence is or isn't a premise, an assumption of the argument, whether it shares a sort of widely shared assumption, or whether it states a widely shared assumption or introduces some piece of factual evidence. We'll be looking for sentences that respond to possible objections or to stated objections, and whether the author is attempting to respond to possible counter-arguments or preempt possible counter-arguments, whether the sentence is derived from some previous sentence via some piece of reasoning, in which case then we're going to have an inference, some sort of a move in the argument. You're going to be looking then to determine how the author made the inference, etc. So these are going to be the general rules of thumb, and throughout, of course, we're going to be looking to see whether the sentence in question states a conclusion. Now, sometimes that'll be difficult to determine. Sometimes the argument or the point of the argument is never actually explicitly stated anywhere in the actual text of the argument. This is not an unusual circumstance. Now, so what we're going to do is look at a relatively simple argument where at first it's difficult to see exactly where the conclusion lies. So this is an editorial from Paul Krugman from a few days ago. I'm not meaning to pick on Krugman here. It's just something I noticed the other day. And so let's take a look at this. So what we're going to first do is try to determine what parts of the argument or what parts of the text are relevant to the argument. I'm going to ask you now to pause the video and read the piece on the screen. And this is the text in its entirety of an editorial from a few days ago in the New York Times. Okay, so assume that you've had a chance to read this and that you've tried to figure out exactly what the context is. Now, there is a link, so the link is targeting the intended context. The claim, of course, is that, well, let's take a look. Here's the context, the worry, and why don't we let you take a few minutes on this. So I'd ask you again to pause and read the context. Okay, so clearly Orrin Hatch, the Republican senator from Utah, is objecting to what he sees as the pressure that the Obama administration has put on insurance companies, and the pressure is to get behind this nonprofit organization that the administration created called Enroll America. Orrin Hatch is alleging that the government's dealings with these insurance companies constitute bullying, and the apparent reason for his suggestion that it's bullying is because the administration is responsible for regulating the activities of the companies and the insurance companies and drug companies that are involved in this endeavor. So, as you've read, Sebelius denies this, but let's return to Krugman. So Krugman is responding in his editorial to this charge that something untoward or something maybe morally problematic has been done by the government in this context. by the administration. So let's take a look again at what he's saying here. And when we look at the content of his argument, we'll see that what he's really arguing for is, or the actual material or the actual action in the argument is happening in red here. So let's take a look. He's saying, well, people will receive coverage from private insurers under the President's healthcare initiative. The private insurance will be selling the policies with subsidies on the exchanges. So it's a subsidized, according to Krugman, it's subsidized, and people will be buying insurance from private insurers, rather. And so he's saying that a public program will increase the profits of the insurance companies. And then he mocks the idea that this can be interpreted as bullying. So notice how little of the actual text is devoted to an argument. So then we might wonder, well, what exactly is going on in the rest of the text? Well, let's take a look. So clearly there's this ad hominem charge against or let's say a straw man attack against in purple here, against the Republican, against Orrin Hatch. He claims that, well, he says he suspects that the idea of helping lower income Americans in any way would drive the GOP bonkers. Well, of course, that's probably false. So it's a straw man. So a straw man is an artificially weakened opponent. Let's look at the second. The second is that they hope that the plan fails, etc., and so on and so forth. So you can see that most of the text is polemical. It sets up, it mocks the Republicans and sets up this straw man depiction of his opponent here. Okay, fair enough. So it's going back then to what actually is the content of the argument. We can see there is no sub-argument involved here, as far as I can tell. And presumably, even though it's not stated, the conclusion or the main contention is that Obama is not bullying private companies into selling the program or into helping sell the program. So he never directly says that, but that presumably is the main contention of this short editorial. Okay. Now you might have misread the editorial as contending, let's say, that the Republicans are irrational, that they don't want to help low-income Americans, et cetera, that they hope that the plan fails, et cetera. But I think it would be a mistake to see that as the main contention of the piece. Okay, so let's look at what the actual content of the argument is then. So for Krugman, he's claiming that it's not bullying because the insurance companies stand to benefit financially. Okay, so what's assumed in that claim? Well, presumably the assumption is that you can't bully someone into doing something that's good for them. And we might disagree with that. We might say, well, in fact, you could bully someone into doing something that's good for them. So let's look at other possible responses to this argument. So it's a very minimal argument, as we've seen. So of course, it's highly unlikely that the insurance companies and the drug companies are being bullied. Krugman might say they're enormously powerful. They've managed to help craft the healthcare reform in such a way that they will benefit financially. So he might be. Well, presumably here he's encouraging us to think that it's very unlikely that they would have been treated in any coercive manner by the administration. But notice that this misses part of the original charge from Orrin Hatch. So Hatch is saying, well, look, Kathleen Sebelius, first off, he claims that she's admitted to pressuring the companies that her agency regulates, and that he thinks is bullying, plain and simple, he writes. Well, okay, so he's charging that there's a morally improper use of the regulatory power of the agencies in order to encourage or compel, rather, the insurance companies and the drug companies, etc., to participate. And notice that that's a different kind of objection or a different kind of challenge than the one Krugman responds to. Okay, so there's, in some sense, the charge here from Hatch is that the reason there's something morally problematic about the government's actions is because Sebelius's agency regulates the companies that are in question. Okay, and so there might be the potential threat of repercussions or retribution as a result of not cooperating. So this is really the issue. It's the idea that she's misusing government power. All right, so anyway, as we saw in the article, Sebelius denies this. Okay, so the point of this exercise was straightforwardly just to find exactly what it is in the original Krugman editorial that he's arguing for, determine what the argument is, what's the actual content of the argument. We see that it's actually quite minimal. He's just saying it's not bullying because the insurance companies stand to benefit financially. And then we're going to consider, and of course that assumes that you can't bully someone into doing something that's good for them, which of course we could disagree with. And then we'll return to see whether he actually meets the worry or addresses the worry that Orrin Hatch points to, namely that it's inappropriate for an agency to have this kind of relationship with companies that the agency regulates. And we might determine that that actually is perfectly proper, that there's nothing out of order there either. Okay, so that was an exercise in determining what the contention is, what the point of the particular argument is. And we'll look at some more cases like that in the text. Okay, thanks.